commit ourselves to education and higher education. If you were to look at other states, Republican or Democrat controlled, New Jersey or California, Connecticut included, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Michigan. If you look at these states, they've made difficult decisions, these governors have. And in this state, our governor made difficult decisions as well. I think, though, that those decisions will, at the end of the day, reflect the concerns and the priorities of Ohioans, regardless of what we think about DLTs or how we got here as a collection of people who've been around the State House for a long time. Regardless of what we feel about DLTs, we do know that an overwhelming majority of Ohioans are opposed to a tax increase. And punishing consumers today or tomorrow is not the right approach to turning around an economy that's been wrecked over the last several years by the failed policies of the prior administration in Washington.
How do you characterize Republicans criticizing the final budget package, but providing the votes to get it passed? Thrown in on that.
Well, I had the chance as a legislator to vote for budgets and against budgets. I voted against budgets when a few of my colleagues voted for budgets. I voted for budgets when all of my colleagues voted for budgets. I recognize that budgets are a reflection of what you stand for and who you are. Mark Wagner from suburban Toledo voted for this budget. Bill Harris voted for this budget. Keith Faber voted for this budget. And in terms of what they like and what they don't like, of course, every budget, you have things you don't really, would rather not be included. But in totality, we have to ask ourselves as legislators, what is best going forward, given the state of the economy and the choices that we have. And in this budget, an investment in higher education and K through 12 was needed. And although the governor did not achieve his tuition freeze for the first year, a 3.5% tuition increase that has already been rejected by the state's largest university is modest when you compare it to the previous 10 years. Outside of the governor's administration, where on average tuition rates increase close to 10%. At Ohio State, the increase over the 8 years of the former administration was close to 70%, 75% during that. So it is important to reflect on how we got here and where we're going with regard to the budget.
What do you say to the human services groups, and any of them being Democratic constituencies, from historically saying that this budget slashes the safety net?
Well, I think the governor's words really speak for all of us. Would we rather do more? Absolutely. Can we do more? We can't. It's a terrible confliction where great leaders have to come to conclusions and then carry across the state of Ohio the message as to why they made those conclusions. And at the end of the day, it will be Ohioans who decide the fate of this budget, whether it will take, whether it was a success or whether it was not a success. I can tell you as a former county commissioner, somebody who's dealt very closely in human resource, in Department of Job and Family Services, somebody who's dealt with these kinds of issues in a long period of my time. I don't think it's ever enough, whatever it is. And if it's additional resources, absolutely. Can we do more? Should we do more? We always can and should do more. But at a difficult time in our economy, when there are no more resources to use, you have to find the core areas of state governance that you can fund and make investments, and then identify resources outside of your area and use those resources as well.
Even though it might be scary and might even politically hurt, but it would have been the braver thing to do and the right thing.
But some Democrats have said that. Some 6, 10, whatever the most recent number is, House Democrats especially pointed out that if we in the future have to look for additional resources, maybe the upper brackets is the place to go. I think Ted Celeste said that. Don't quote me on Ted, but some people have said that, right? I've not heard anything but crickets chirping coming out of the Senate caucus. How does one increase taxes with half of one's caucus in the House? You don't get there with hopes and wishes. You get there with a consensus, a bipartisan consensus in this case, because you need the Republicans in the Senate. And while the governor, rightfully so, as our governor, our leader, has to accept both the credit and perhaps the criticism, if those disagree with him, those others who want to criticize disagree with him. There must be shared responsibility for this budget. No, it's the governor that proposes, yet it's the legislature that disposes. And it's the legislature's responsibility, if they want to look for other areas of revenue or want to look for other areas of investment, to just tell us. Just tell us. And in the case of the legislature in total, it's been clear that there is an unwillingness to increase taxes. Pragmatically, it just simply won't happen until the Republicans in the Senate come to the conclusion that this is the course that they will also travel down. Reverend Edgar, with all due respect to Reverend Edgar or any other stakeholders whose concerns are real and should never be dismissed or diminished, there's hurting going on in this state. We have to ask ourselves whether or not we fund our priorities first, or we raise taxes and then more people are hurt because of it. And it lessens the likelihood that we come out of a recession sooner rather than later. It's like the libraries complaining that they didn't get enough investment. The choices between funding mental health at even these reduced levels versus funding Ohio's libraries at modest reductions is a pretty easy one to make. Libraries rank #1 in the nation. I think the governor uses the statistic 44 cents on the dollar for every man, woman, and child in Ohio is invested in Ohio's libraries. The next nearest state is Hawaii at 20 cents. Most states don't fund public libraries the same way Ohio does. And if you have your choice between mental health services or libraries, that in the minds of a lot of leaders, Republican and Democrat, is pretty easily debatable. But when you have less resources for all, that's where you really have to make difficult decisions.
Chris, I know you used to be a legislator,